And there we go. Okay. Good stuff. All right, I think we're live. Let me see if I can get the chat going here. Twitch. TV. How will I even know? Okay, good. Yo, hi everybody. Okay, good. We're live. That's awesome. So I don't know what we're supposed to do today. I want to solve some problems that I've got. I've come to the subtle realization that the only way I'm gonna get past bugs in my software is just to stop running software. That's the only thing I can do for sure. So I was hoping maybe you could all help me today or join me today. I'm actually working on my pipeline, right? So let's see what we got here. Don't need that. Don't need that. Or that. Or that. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to basically I've got a okay, background here. I have a podcast. This podcast comes out every Friday. The episodes are just usually me talking to somebody that's smarter than I am, which is a admittedly low bar, but nonetheless worth doing, right? Because there are lots of interesting people that are smarter than I am, and they can teach me things, and it's an excuse for me to learn something and then turn on the microphone while sharing what I've learned. And I've been doing this for 2 years now, I guess, almost 2 years. January will be 2 years. And I've gotten lazier and lazier as I've been writing these episodes, as I've been recording and doing these episodes. And what I've noticed is I've ended up building a whole pipeline, right? I've just really, everything except for the interviews is just eye-wateringly boring to me. Really, really just boring. And so I have a whole Git repository here called Bootiful Podcast. Okay? And here, it's all open source, so please feel free. Here I've got a lot of stuff. It's actually just a lot of stuff. There's an API. There's a desktop client that I built called Desktop. You can see that. There's an API that actually does the, it's a REST API that takes the actual files that get uploaded. So basically the only deliverable every week for me is the MP3 that represents the beginning of the show, and then the MP3 that represents the interview. And that's been lightly pre-processed in something like Adobe Audition or whatever. But then everything from stringing it together with the intro, the music, all that stuff, transitions, and everything involved in delivering that to your phones or your podcast players, whatever. All that is automated, right? The pipeline from MP3s to people's phones is completely automated. And in order to do that, I have a desktop client that I wrote that uses JavaFX, right? And so if I look at this, it uses JavaFX and Spring, of course, but it's JavaFX, right? And so that's this thing right here. It's an app. It works. It's fine. You can see it just loaded up just fine this time. And that's this thing right here, desktop client, that actually does all the work, right? So it's actually, you can see it's a native, so quote unquote native macOS app that happens to also be a Spring application, a Spring JavaFX application, right? And so all of that is implied in this code base here, and you can see there's it's not a huge application, but there's still a lot of interesting stuff in there. And so part of this was actually figuring out how to get JavaFX and Spring to work well together. And thankfully, Spring is pretty flexible, and JavaFX is pretty flexible, so it was actually not all that difficult. A lot of that work was in a prototype that the amazing, legendary Trisha G and I put together a few years ago for a Java 1 talk, right? So that talk, we actually did a Java 1, or what is it called? Code 1 talk, right? And that talk was, I think it was okay, right? I liked it. I had a lot of fun. I learned, obviously, from her, so she's a legend, so that was cool. And so anyway, I've got this desktop application. Here's the thing. It's a desktop application, which means that I need to have Java installed. So I was thinking, well, if I'm not using the right version of Java for whatever reason, because I do a lot of demos like this one, if I'm using the wrong version of Java, then my desktop application won't boot. So if for whatever reason I'm using Java 8, which I only tend to do these days with Growl VM, then it won't start, right? So I have to go to SDK manager on my operating system and choose the new system version. I have to set the system version to Java 11, and plus it's Java code, right? It's like, I did my best to write clean JavaFX code, but it's sort of like in JavaFX all the components have to be public, which is weird. Everything else is private, of course, and then you're building the component model all through Java code as well. So here's my photo view, set preserve ratio, blah blah blah. You can actually do some loose design in terms of Fxml. That's the what is it? I guess it's sort of the rendering markup, whatever. Is that here? I think it might be here. Yeah, buttons form Fxml, right? So this is the Fxml markup, and you just end up laying out things here. You have actually a WYSIWYG kind of experience, but there are very few designer tools that actually work well with this kind of UI, right? With this kind of layout. So one is NetBeans, of course, which does a fantastic job, and actually IntelliJ's JetBrains, JetBrains IntelliJ IDEA does a fantastic job there too. So it's fine for layout, but it is, let's just say that at the JavaFX at its best hasn't caught up to HTML5, and so I was thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be cool? Because it's not really it's not a really big deal. It's just a title, a description, and some fields in which I can then specify I forgot the photo. There's also a photo that gets selected for every episode. So I just plug that in, hit publish, and then I can walk away. Kind of like in the movies when you see people light the fuse and then they walk away and it explodes behind them. That's what it's like for me every Thursday. I have that, I put in the sun sheet, right? Every single time I publish an episode. So I was thinking, okay, I want to turn this into a web application, right? And so then this is all sort of coincident with my daughter learning about CSS and JavaScript, and we're trying to take advantage of all this extra time that she's got due to the pandemic and all that downtime. There's no hour-long bus rides anymore. There's no after school things like that. There's not even visits with friends, unfortunately. She's got Zoom like the rest of us, but so just a lot of idle time. So we've got her some tutors, and she's been learning about CSS, which has evolved like crazy, compared to where we were a few years ago. And yeah, okay, good. You can hear me now, good. And so CSS has evolved like crazy, and as has what's possible in the browser. And so I went down this whole path of how do I learn to build UIs, the web, on the web, The last time I did this was when we still called things Ajax, Ajax refers to not the cleaning product in this case, it's the phenomenon of sending data over the network using the XML HTTP request object. There was now apparently a built-in API for that, document fetch, or window fetch. So just a lot of learning to do. And one little rabbit hole I went down was sort of, I want to figure out what the workflow was. It used to be that if you were a designer, you would go into a tool like Illustrator or Photoshop or something, come up with a design, and then eventually in the middle of in like the 2000s, those years, it became conceivable that the designer would also hand over the markup, the actual web-friendly markup. But this is all before the iPhone, right? So a designer could take their, almost impossible to turn into HTML Photoshop rendering, and then drag that into Dreamweaver and slice and dice their way to absolutely positioned CSS divs and all these sort of layout elements that just wouldn't work in a mobile responsive way, right? But that was okay because we only had one output destination, only one target destination in the early 2000s, and that was your desktop browser-based web experience. Nobody thought about WebML or all that stuff, right? So it's just totally different experience, and the designer would work in Adobe or whatever they used, and that was the tool that would create the markup. So you had Adobe Dreamweaver, you had what was the other? Microsoft Front Page, right? This is like the WYSIWYG HTML designing tools, and it's fine. I never loved it, but on the other hand, it almost seemed better than somebody just handing a developer a Photoshop document or Photoshop file or a JPEG, basically, an image of a website, and saying, "Here, make that real." Like you can render things in Photoshop that you can't actually articulate in HTML, and that was the source of my frustration at the time. Was, what am I supposed to, like? This is doing things that are just not possible over here, right? And I think that's a big reason why things like Flash took off, because suddenly the tools that designers were using could also conceivably be turned into an application, right? And so the designer-developer workflow was less volatile, right? I could design something over here if I wanted to, and then have that be a real thing that people can actually see in their browser client, through the magic of the Flash plugin. And Adobe built it. They even had a tool, and I forget what it's called. It's not. I know there's a Macromedia Flex, which was the designer, which was the developer sort of tooling, which is terrible. But it was the developer tooling for ActionScript, which is a programming language that people used for building Flash-based, Visual Basic applications, basically form-driven, data-driven, programming intense sort of Flash applications, right? So it wasn't just about animating things on the timeline as you would were you using something like Adobe After Effects. It was more about, I've got a widget that has validation logic attached to it, and what happens to the code when I press this button, and what happens if I want to submit a form, and all that stuff, right? And so, at that point, Adobe was pretty. They were making a lot of progress. They had gotten to the point where they had a tool where it was designed to be like this ultimate transfer tool. You can design stuff for Flex, but it was also designed to work with artifacts that designers would have, right? So you could actually say this is a Photoshop layer or whatever, but it is also a button, and it would just sort of turn it into a Flex application for you. So, and you could round trip. That was the whole promise of it. And I forget what it's called because it was gone too soon, right? It lived for a minute and a half, and then suddenly the iPhone came out, and Steve Jobs said, "We're not interested in supporting Flash on the phone," and nothing to argue with there. It seemed like a good idea to not support Flash. I can understand why they did that, but that changed everything. Suddenly, and even if Flash were supported, there was still the issue of the form factor. We could no longer target software for the desktop-based web browser, right? And so here we are now, 13, 14 years later, and I haven't really been paying attention to web design in the last 10 years at least. I know enough to create a form. I know enough to do basic 2000 era, 2010 style CSS, but I have no idea about all the stuff that they've released in the last 10 years. I've briefly flirted with Angular and with React and with Vue.js or Vue.js, and of the three, I've come to quite like Vue.js. And so I figured, gosh, now would be a good time since my kid's learning it, and I'm woefully out of date, and I need a web-based application. I want a browser-based application to learn about this, right? To see what it's like today. What does the designer-developer handoff look like? And I really, this has always been fascinating to me, because I think a lot of people, when they first start learning to build software, they think about it in terms of moving pretty pixels around on the screen, right? It doesn't matter whose pixels or what the purpose of those pixels are, but there's something about visual feedback that I think is really compelling. So for a lot of people I know that are engineers today, really accomplished engineers today, it was things like video games, right? They built video games, right? That kind of stuff. For me, I like the idea of making things dance, right? I like the software that made animations possible. I like software that made graphics possible, right? And seeing what I could do to control the browser. And that's the irony of this, is a lot of my initial code was visual stuff, right? C++, and JavaScript eventually, and all that kind of stuff. And what server-side code I started to learn in the 90s was really just so I could have a form that did something useful, that a good-looking user interface. I didn't care so much about the back end business logic at first, right? Boy, did I miss the boat there, huh? But so I started with the simplest thing that could possibly work, at least so I thought I did, right? I learned CGI, right? And I did. And remember, CGI is just standard in, standard out. It's not even, you're just writing programs that take standard in, standard out, and you're connecting it to a daemon in Apache, right? So this thing would spin up your program, send data into it, you'd respond, send data out. It was basically the servlet API with none of the benefits of the servlet API. No polymorphism, no object model of any kind, and also you take the whole process space. You take a whole process to handle a request. So basically, it was like Node, but only one user, right? Not just one thread, but one user. Or you could have multiple threads, but it would be a C program with multiple threads inside of it, right? You'd still have the cost of spinning up the process space. So I learned about that, and I did CGI the hard way. I did it with native code, right? C and C++. And I just thought, like, there's got to be a better way, And eventually, you get into like building actual server-side applications in the early 2000s, and at some point, I started looking at what the better way was, and by that point, I'd learned applets, things like that. I learned JNLP, the Java Native Launcher Protocol. I learned different techniques to build rich clients, right? And I was into JavaScript. I don't know if there's a website. There used to be a website called Webmonkey, and Webmonkey was wired. I don't know if it's a list. I'm almost scared to Google it. Webmonkey. Yeah, how to build. No, free. Wasn't okay. Aw. Was an online tutorial website composed of various articles. It was content was presented much like Wired magazine, but for learning and designing web content. Webmonkey had content applicable. Okay, it was launched in 1996, right? Oh, it was shut down in 2004. Oh, reopened in 2006 and then shut down again in 2006. But converted due to spam issues. Instead, the Webmonkey website was regularly updated with news articles by Scott Gilbertson until May 2013, when it was decided to stop producing content for it. The Webmonkey rose. Okay, so I guess that's no longer there, but there's a whole bunch of great content there when I was learning about this stuff in the early 2000s. You can see it was 96 and onward. And in the 90s, I even learned JavaScript on this website, right? So there's a Tao's JavaScript tutorial. I'm not sure how many people use that. Anyway, all of that it's sort of visual, right? And so that designer-developer handoff is all about making the visual actual, right? I want to take something that looks cool and make it into something that is actually cool. I mean, it does something useful as opposed to just looking pretty, right? Few would disagree that you need to have function. The real question is whether you also need to have form, right? And, we talk dismissively, perhaps, about this idea of form over function. You don't want something that's pretty but doesn't do anything useful, right? I wouldn't mind function over form. Like if it's hard to use but it works and there's nothing else that does the job, then I'll take it, right? In a pinch, I'll take something that's not elegant looking or doesn't have a useful UX. It's not a great UX. I'd prefer that over nothing, right? So what I want is both. I'm not saying you don't need design. I'm saying you definitely need design, and it's an absolutely critical part of your production cycle. The way you build something and deliver it to production. It's just that I wanted to learn how to take pretty and make it powerful. What do I do there? So like I said before, you could just somebody would drop markup in your lap and say, here, make this a web page, make this a real thing, and it was tedious because the markup you'd get from these WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get tools were just terrible, absolutely monstrous, and as often as not, they were just tables, just absolutely abused and contorted into the worst, in the worst ways to create a markup or layout that if you breathed on it, it would just fall apart, right? You couldn't introduce one extra pixel of characters, or the whole thing would just start shattering, right? And I didn't like that, so that was not good. But on the other hand, it was better than having to figure out yourself. I don't know. It was never a good solution. And so I did actually go down the Adobe Flash, the Macromedia, and then Adobe Flash route, right? And that was easy also because I had used a lot of tools from that era. I don't know how many of you remember a layer home site, and a layer Cold Fusion, right? I never used really Cold Fusion. I briefly got interested in it for a second when it became a Java infrastructure, when it started to become something you could run on Java infrastructure. But from the client side perspective, I loved the editor, Layer Home Site. It was a great text editor, just text. There's no design tool to it. And then suddenly Dreamweaver started becoming very popular. It was a design tool, and then eventually Adobe, by way of the acquisition of Macromedia, which had in turn acquired a layer, suddenly Adobe came into a situation where they had both a Dreamweaver and home site under their banister, the roster, and so suddenly Dreamweaver got a lot of text editing tools. You can actually do pretty good markup editing there. And it's like, okay, well, this isn't so bad. And anyway, you can see I cared about this stuff a minute ago. I haven't cared about it recently because it's hard enough getting stuff in the back end to work, and I just haven't really bothered. And plus, I got to tell you, all those jokes aside, front end JavaScript is terrifying. I mean, there's just so much to learn there. Is this what it feels like when people come into the JVM and they're just sort of like, here's everything we've done in the last 25 years, figure it out for yourself, right? I can only imagine what it's like. Except in the JavaScript ecosystem, it's only been effectively since Node, right, which is 10 years, or 11 years at most. And so the fact that it can feel that overwhelming for just 11 years is not good, and you don't really have a strong type system to guide you to control space your way to working software. So I just feel like you end up in a situation where you're just hoping they haven't updated the software in the last week. Otherwise, everything's gonna break, and you can't really, we kvetch about YAML configuration for Kubernetes and things like that. But imagine if everything, the code and the configuration and the build and everything, was just similarly untyped and similarly volatile. Like what would you do there? So I don't know. I've been trying to figure out that workflow, and so I learned about something in the last 10 years where there's now these tools that constrain you as a designer. They don't let you design things that cannot be rendered on the web. And so one such tool is called Adobe XD. Another one is called Figma. And these are tools that designers use. Let's see here. These are tools that designers use These are tools that designers use to design things that that can then be turned into CSS, given today's state-of-the-art technologies, right? And so I got into this Adobe XD, and it's nice because you can drag and drool stuff from Photoshop and all that, and you can create mock-ups of your components, and in theory, there's nothing that you can design in this that couldn't be translated to CSS. So same thing for Figma, and Figma is actually even a step further. It's completely online, which I think is amazing. The fact that I can do design work like that in a browser today is, amazing. So I took a stab at learning XD, watched a few thousand tutorials. It feels like 5 trillion tutorials, and I designed what I want my web application to look like. Right? I want it to have 2 sections. One where I can create new episodes, and you can see each thing is. The goal is not to export this to markup. It doesn't actually do that, right? This is still just something I need to then design myself using the HTML. And I want to have a search screen where you can search for things, and you can also update episodes, right? So, like, good stuff, right? Like lots of, just a very basic UI. And then I started learning about CSS and JavaScript and, all that stuff, right? All that stuff that people were using to build their stuff, right? So then I learned about HTML, right? HTML and CSS, and that's basically where I ended up. So I've got now this app. You can see I've started the work of. Let's see, where's the page? Here we go, page. I've started the work of taking the. Where's my UI? Do I have the HTML markup itself somewhere here? This one. New window. Okay. So I have the work. Let me see if I can find this here. reveal in Finder, open the browser. There you go. So there's the actual markup, right? And you can see it's just static. There's nothing here yet, but it does work, right? There's text fields and all that stuff, and links are links. And now it's like, okay, well, I want to turn this design, which is actually markup, into something that works with the server side. So I said, okay, well, now that I've got real markup, just markup though, just CSS and HTML, right? I got my responsive UI, and you can see I've learned just enough to be able to avoid having style tags in the markup. So everything here is, it's rendered, but there's no, it's just divs and some, wherever I remember semantic elements, right? I'm not using HTML for layout. I'm not using tables. I'm not using style in the markup itself. And so in theory, I can swap out the CSS and get a completely different user interface, right? And so the user interface here, it's all described in this markup and in this CSS here, right? So lots of CSS, but hey, really amazing, right? So now I'm trying to turn that into an actual browser-based application as opposed to just HTML and forms and CSS. So that gets me to Vue.js. And so I've got this Vue.js application, and I've managed to create a create episode page and a search page, and a search endpoint and / both map to the search page. And the page here is just a component. It lives inside of a markup endpoint here, whatever. And each page is a component, and each one of them can take a sidebar block and and then the rest of the user interface, the layout, the main thing that shows up in the panel, shows up here. And so if I go to local, you can see that this is actually a Vue.js application. Click on that, and you can see it's just, there's no network request happening. It's just all, it's updating the URI, but there's no actual it's not actually loading an HTTP page, right? It's just updating the DOM in the browser. So okay, that works, right? I'm able to change it. So if I say take 3, 2, whatever, and then there you go, right? I can search, gives you that, take 2, create gives you this, etc. So okay, so now I've got that working, and the next thing I want to figure out is creating a secure HTTP endpoint, right? And so what I was hoping to do in this episode, all that preamble aside, what I was hoping to do is figure out what I did to make JWT, which is JSON Web Tokens. I want to figure out what I did to make that work, because it's been a minute, and it shouldn't be that big a deal. I've done it before, and I've even done Vue.js code before. So there's that. And the other thing I wouldn't mind introducing to you is the insanely trivial work I just finished doing to introduce a search endpoint for my service. So the API that I just talked to you about. And the reason I want that is because I need to drive the user interface here, right? I've got a search page. No, that's the old API here. Search page. And the search page, if you can see that here, is going, I'm going to be able to enter a query, and I want to be able to see results, right, that come back. So I needed to create a search endpoint, and that resulted in me writing a lot of code. Where's my IntelliJ? Here. There we go. That's this thing right here. And so I ended up writing, and I was like, well, I want to create a search engine. I need I want really good search support, but I also want that support to be, I don't want to have to write a lot of code. And I was thinking, well, I could just figure out how to deploy an Elasticsearch or something like that, right? That would do it. But like what I want is something where I have a separate database that's optimized for my podcast. But keep in mind, like I said, it's an episode a week for 2 years now. So we're not even at 200 episodes, right? We're not even at 100. Well, we're just barely at 100, right? Like it's just it's just not that much data. There's really no reason for this to become like a whole Josh goes spelunking for an Elasticsearch on-demand production setup. So I was like, well, what can I do to just easily add search to my application? And then I was like, well, what's Elasticsearch based on? It's based on Lucene. right? I don't know if you remember Lucene, but Lucene is a search API, right? And I figured that I used to use that. That wasn't so bad 10 years ago, 15 years ago. How hard would it be to introduce that into my world again? And you can just create a lightweight in-memory Lucene index, right? It wouldn't be a separate server. It would just be part and parcel of the existing Bootiful Podcast API. And so I figured I could add that right now. And so I did that. And so that ended up into a separate digression here. So let me introduce that to you. Code. Okay. CD. Lucene. So I ended up writing this thing, which is a little library to make working with Lucene a little bit easier. This reminds me, there used to be something called a Lucene Spring project, and I couldn't figure out whether it had been updated in the last decade or not, or if anybody's using it. I guess maybe it's a hint, maybe the state of the art really is just to set up a Elasticsearch, but that doesn't seem easier, you know, it just feels, I want a library, not a whole standalone piece of infrastructure that I have to manage. So I wanted to just stand up a in-memory Lucene index and just build the index on every single startup, right? It's not a big deal. Even if I do this for another 20 years, it still won't be even close to a big deal, right? It'll just be a very small index. So I wanted to have a Lucene index where I could search, and I wanted to be able to write data to the index. So basically, I ended up creating a template, right? Very, very similar to other templates in the Spring ecosystem, and it works, right? It's pretty simple. It's pretty trivial. Once you've got the Lucene template, you can write stuff to it, right? So here I'm saying, given a collection of whatever, I pass in a callback, and that callback is, the job of that thing is to turn every instance of T in this collection of whatever into a document, right? Which is what Lucene uses to write, and so I'm just turning it into an object of type document write, which contains the term by which I want that document indexed and the document itself, and that's it, right? I'm just writing things to the index that way, and then finally I can search it. I can say, okay, use the template. I can search for a query, how many results I want back, and I can say for every document that comes back, kind of like a JDBC template row mapper, for every result that comes back, I get a document, and I can then map it to something else. In this case, I'm just mapping it to the string UID, right, just to prove that so if you look at this, I've got a list of string, right? That's what I have there. Right? So very trivial, but it works. Now I have suddenly the ability to create a easy search engine, right, in my API. So and it's just auto config. It's a starter, so I just it's available in my Artifactory instance, right? It's just a regular Spring Boot starter, and I'm using that here in my API. And so the API, let's see here, the API gets all the podcasts from the database, right? We have that in the database, and then when the application starts up, or when a new episode is published, right? So whenever I publish a new episode of the podcast, an event gets published in the application context, and also when the application starts up, I call refresh. I want to refresh the index based on those events, and all that does is it reads everything from the database, and then for each one of those, it updates this in-memory map of episodes, and then it writes them all to the database. It writes it all to Lucene, and then I can do a search. So that's up and running, and so if I do this, if I do Maven Spring Boot run, or actually just do this. And this one actually is going to connect to RabbitMQ in a faraway galaxy, so it'll take a long time because it's connecting to several pieces of infrastructure, not in my local machine, right? It actually takes a ridiculously long time to start up, not because of anything intrinsically slow, right? This API is a pretty big API at this point. I'm actually starting to wonder if some of it might not benefit from being extracted out into microservices. But the real issue is not the breadth of the code, right? It's actually more that I've got a RabbitMQ instance in Virginia somewhere that I'm connecting to for everything, right? And so all that is problematic. But once that's up and running, come on. Is it gonna go up and running? Oh, there we go. So Tomcat started on port 8080. So okay, good. Localhost. Podcasts. And so you can see there's the podcast endpoint that shows you everything, right? And then podcasts search query equals Jurgen, for example. Right, and I get that result back. And that's driven by the Lucene index, that search endpoint. And I can also do some very interesting things. I can do full-on Lucene queries. I can say title, Jurgen, right, description, whatever, Spring Boot, right? And so it would have to be something where Jurgen is in the title, and then something is in the description, right? That kind of thing. And you can even do quotes, and I'm not sure if that would encode correctly. Let's try. No, that didn't quite work. So you can, whatever. Anyway, if you can encode it, you can send a query as complex as you want using the Lucene query syntax. So Lucene query syntax. And the syntax is really, really amazing, right? You can actually say, okay, I want title the right way. And, oh, that's what you would do. And, right? And, so let's, wonder if that would work. So we say query title, Jurgen, and description, Spring Boot, nothing, right? But if I do just Spring Framework, you get one back, right? So maybe I didn't mention Spring Boot in here, but I did mention Spring Framework. What if I said description, okay, what about title Spring Boot? Alright, so you get 3 episodes there. No, that didn't quite work. I didn't encode it correctly. You have to encode it correctly. That's the issue. Either way, very, very powerful syntax. And I can use that to drive this user interface that we just created. But before I do that, I want to figure out how to lock it down with JWT. So that's what we're going to do today for the next, whatever, half hour. And then we'll move on to the actually building the user interface, the client there. So I actually saved myself some pain here. You see JWT. I built a Spring Boot starter that you can use back in June. Is that right? June, July, May, something. What does it say? 5 months ago? What month are we in now? We're in the 10th month. Goodness, yeah. So July would be 7. So June is 6, and May is the 5th month, and we're in the 10th month. So this is May. Oh, there it is, right there. May. See, May. Yeah. So I've got it's a starter. There's 2 variants of it that you can use. So one is for reactive web applications, and one is for non-reactive web applications. Either way, you just add it to the class path, configure the properties, and ta-da! You've got an HTTP endpoint that is secure. So we use start.spring.io, secure API. We're going to do a quick sprint to make sure a stock standard plain Jane sort of API works. I don't want to do anything with the existing API that I've got. I want to lock down that search API and everything in it, but I want to do that after I've made sure that nothing is broken in my starter or that I didn't miss something obvious. I just need to refresh my memory because it might fail. I should probably do a better job of documenting this, first of all. There are some samples. That's the good news. I gave myself an out. I gave myself some samples so I can, hopefully I'll be able to reconnect the context there. But this works. This is actually pretty interesting. I wrote this code trying to just create an endpoint that gave me a JOT token. I love OIDC, I love OAuth, but sometimes all you want is just a JOT token, right? And so I wrote a prototype, and I got that close, right? It was so close to being usable. And then I pestered the poor Spring security team, who I'm sure have anything else to do in their with their life. But they were so very friendly, as they always are to anybody, and they helped me. And so the code here actually bears the fingerprints of, I think, Josh Cummings and Rob Winch, right? So it works despite me. Let's put it that way. Like, no matter how hard I tried to screw it up, it still works, because they're awesome. And if it doesn't work right now, it's because of something I did. Whatever I did, I don't even know. We're going to find out. So, start.spring.io, secure API. I guess I want security and just web. I've got a this pipeline doesn't use the reactive APIs. And that would be another sprint, would actually be turning into a reactive API. And the reason it doesn't use the reactive APIs is because I'm talking to a number of things to make this work, including but not limited to AWS S3. I'm talking to Pinboard. Am I? Maybe? No, probably not. I'm talking to Podbean. I don't know. I just remember there's a bunch of things to which I'm making requests that aren't asynchronous or reactive. They're just sort of like, stand back and we'll get you a response, you know. And I could make it work, but as it was, I would be spending most of my code. Oh, and there's also Spring integration flow, right? And Spring integration has its own way of managing threads. And since it's just me publishing one episode a week, like it's not like I'm overworking it or anything like that, right? But maybe one day. It's getting to the point where I can actually take a lot of these endpoints and turn them into reactive APIs if I wanted to. One thing that was stopping me before that I can address today is I uploaded part of the API. If you look at this, pipeline service. So basically there's a controller. Where is that controller? Pipeline controller. And if somebody posts, my neck. If somebody posts something to this endpoint, here we go, posts. No, is that it? Yeah, I guess that's it. You pass in a multi-part file, right? And a UID. So the UID is the client ID for the multi-part file. And the file is actually supposed to be a zip file. That's the other thing, is I have to, in order to continue using this, I have to have the new web browser-based application do some zipping on the client, which is going to be interesting. I'm not sure if I want to figure that out, or if it might just be worth reworking the code to support the uploading of a number of different files all tied with the same correlation ID. I don't know. That has to be figured out as well. But either way, this thing expects a zip file with 3 files named a certain way. That's how it knows what's supposed to be in the podcast, is this payload, this zip file artifact. And so it was a file to upload. And one thing that's dropping in Spring Framework 5.3 is new support for reactive file upload. So before, it kind of worked, but it wasn't really reactive, right? Behind the scenes, it was using... that was not code that we had written, right? That was code that was coming from some other thing. I forget what it was, but it's not true reactive file upload. And so Arjen Poutsma, who's I think I just did an episode with him. Is that the one that just came out? Bootiful Podcast.fm. Yeah. Listen to this episode if you haven't already listened to it. Our longtime Spring developer, longtime Spring framework engineer, Arjen Poutsma. He just talks about how there's a brand new feature actually in the latest version of Spring Framework to support reactive file uploads. So that's another thing that was kind of blocking me, and now, because before it wouldn't have made a difference if I used a reactive API or non-reactive API, since most of the I/O was in the file upload. But now I might actually get a win there. Not that I need the scale, but it would be nice to have a consistent API, a consistent experience of it. So all of that is on the to-do list. So for now, since it's not a reactive API, let's just go with good old Spring MVC, build a Spring security application, secure API, hit generate. Okay. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to try today is Java 15. Let me see. I have. Okay, let's try this. We're going to update to the new one. Update. This might break everything. Perfect time to break my IDE, which is, it's when I'm live. When I'm live, you know, streaming, I want things to break. That's the best time, because then it doesn't surprise me when I'm streaming later. We know it could break now, right? That's fine. Probably fine. Nothing could go wrong. I wouldn't worry about it. Actually, there's a lot of stuff here. Might as well. I'm not using anything except for WebStorm right now, but whatever. Okay, so I've got this. And the other thing I want to test out eventually is, does Java 15 now work out of the box? Like if I just create a brand new, I know Spring supports it. If I create a brand new Spring application using Java 15, does that, do I just automatically get language level 15 and all that from IntelliJ? And if so, can I use text blocks now without having to do a preview feature? That's the other thing. And the other thing I want to take a look at in this stream is native image building, right? Because mad scientist Andy Clement just sent me over a really amazing native image with the actuator and Spring Web Flux and reactive data access and all that stuff. And I just wanted to kind of go through it and just see what what does it look like to take a regular Spring app and turn it into a native image these days. So let's try all these things today. Secure API first. I'm going to use Java 11 though. I hit generate. CD downloads. I should write this down. Sublime. Okay. And don't save. To do investigate Java 15 and IntelliJ update. Investigate Andy's awesome sauce native image app with actuator, web flux, and or 2DBC. Actuator plus Kubernetes probes. Investigate JWT and Spring security. Investigate securing API with JWT Spring security. So that's kind of what we're going to do. These two first, let's just get those out of the way, and then we'll see if that works. If it works, it'll take a few minutes, and if it doesn't, then I'll just cry quickly and revert back to the old one. And then finally, we can look at this one, which is this one's amazing, right? Andy Clement, just he's one of the he's one of the mad scientists working on our native image support for Spring, and it's just so the idea that I can build an application that's native and boots up that quickly is just love it. Okay, okay, JWT and Spring security. So we go here, hit generate, CD downloads. Okay. And by the way, people, I'm happy to answer questions if there's any, or chat or whatever. I'm not sure that there are all that many people online right now, but I'm here. Okay. First things first, I need to connect this application to my JWT starter. Xml. So already we got an issue. Why is that? Repository seems real. Maven install. No, it's not happy. Why is it not happy? Resolution will be. Oh, it's the starter. Okay, wait. Root. Starter root. I need this thing right here. I don't need the root. That was a pom.xml as opposed to a Maven jar dependency. Cool. That looked like it did something interesting. What all? I don't know, but it does. Oh, there we go. Look, it's created a token endpoint. So what do I need? How do I use it? That's the next question. So go here. Samples, WebMVC. Demo application. Oh. Okay, let's just copy and paste until it works. For the looks of it, I need Lombok. Okay. Okay. So this is redundant, don't need this. Actually, I wanted that, didn't I? So let's just use a logger. Goody. What's the issue here? Seems fine. Okay, happy with that. Alrighty, so there's that. There's my in-memory authentication, my Spring security configuration, which is enabling cores, which we care about. It's locking down every endpoint as being required, and then it's configuring the jot bits. Right? It's just using the jot. So I'll use that, and then everything else seems okay. I can go to the token endpoint. So the idea is that I should be able to go to the token endpoint, make a request. I'm going to post a username and password doing HTTP basic authentication, and then I'll get this token back, and I want to be able to then make a call to the greetings endpoint with the authorization header bearer passing in the token, and I should be able to get a response, but not otherwise. So let's try it. Let's just run this and see if that all works. Port 8080 is already in use. Of course it is. I don't care about that. do care about what is using 4880. Is it this thing? Oh yeah. What's the issue now, friend? Oh, of course. Don't get too cute, Josh. Just kill the instance. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, look at that. Seems to have worked. I made the call to the token endpoint, and I get a response back. Okay. That was almost too easy. What, is there no configuration or anything required? JWT. Oops. There's Spring Security's JWT support. Let's see. Do I have anything that's required here? I don't even know what the namespace is, right? So if I go back here, properties. It's JWT dot issuer audience key and token URL. That's it. Oh, it's this bit. That's the. Okay, so in theory, I could say JWT dot token URI my token. Well, I guess not. Am I missing something obvious here? Okay. That's the JWT bits. What about the WebMVC endpoint mapping? Where does that get done? One wonders. So if it's a servlet API, and after we've gotten the JWT configuration, then properties get token URL. That's the endpoint that we're mapping it to. And we're saying we want to apply the DSL for token URL there as well. Or JWT properties token URL. So what about just JWT token URL? Does that work? Why wouldn't that work? Yeah, router function map. That's weird. WebMVC token endpoint auto configuration. Do I have a hard-coded string in there somewhere? What about just debugging it? Let's just see if the values are being applied or not. Yeah, they're not even being applied. What is going on here? The defaults are kicking in. Where's... You know what it might be? I think because I got cute and... Okay, that's time to update some code, huh? So cd code JWT get poll idea Palmer XML. So is it this bit? Indexing. Updating, downloading, building. This is the life cycle of building software. Okay, seems happy. So what about here? Re-import, console. Okay, seems more like it. What about this? Okay, nice new bugs. Connection refused. Sure, but to what? Oh yeah, there's no... Okay, thanks. Okay, so... if we go to here... Why do I not have auto-config for that? Let's shut this down and open it up again. CD downloads, CD secure API. Okay. Secure API. And it's indexing. There we go. So I did everything right on the JDBT side. I just changed things midstream, and so IntelliJ cached, I think, the auto-completion insight based on the old index of that configuration metadata. So, okay, so now let's see if it token URI equals my token. Let's see if that works, huh? By here. Take 3. Not quite. Okay, might. Okay, wait, actually that might be a good thing. Let's try this again. Huzzah, look at that. Okay, so that's working, right? That's what we expect. I get auto completion, and it's a token endpoint, so I can customize things as I expect. The only thing you really need to specify, if memory serves, is a key. And the reason you want to specify this is because, you know, imagine that the app restarts, right? And when it restarts, it's going to use it's going to use a salt basically to create these keys, and that's what you're providing here. And you want the key to be something that is stable. Otherwise, people that logged in, you know, now, should the app restart in a minute from now, they won't be able to log in when the app is back up and running 3 minutes from now, right? So you need to have something that is the same key across restarts. Obviously, a lot of people just do something, they'll generate something random, right? So export my key equals whatever, and you'll use some sort of whatever. You can actually do export JWT key equals, and then, does that work? You know, that could work, right? Like, so what is echo JWT key? You get that random number, right? And as if you put that in a GitHub secrets, right, for your organization, then every server that connects would have the same thing, which is nice. But of course, you don't want it to be too predictable, so we want to make it like, there's a random element here, right? Random.uuid. So if you do that, and then you just print out, you inject the properties. So I want to inject the JWT properties object from my autoconfig here in my client, and I'm going to tell Spring to just automatically inject that for me. I can log that out when the application starts up. Log.info. The key is, whoa, is job properties dot get key. Whoa. 401. What did I just do? Serve that. Oh, it's a key endpoint. Right, so you can see that'll give you a random value, right, in your configuration. But actually, you'll get but behind the scenes, the autoconfig will actually create a random key for you anyway, so it's not really all that big a deal. But the point is, if you wanted something to be stable, if you wanted the keys, the client to be able to authenticate across restarts, I think that needs to be stable. So I don't really care, since I'm, the timeout for the token is still less. It's still it's long. It's a long time in my case, but since I only deploy once a week, it's gonna time out anyway. It's not like I don't have a 7-day session basically for the token, so I get prompted to log in no matter what every single time I use it, which is to say 52 times a year. So it's not a big deal. But if you cared, that's what you would do. So now we know this works. Whew. Are we prepared to update our little API now? So before we do that, let's take a quick look and see how our IntelliJ is doing. 2020. So I've got now IntelliJ 2020.2 .2.3. Which version is this? Help. 2020.2. When did this come out? October 6, 2020. Like yesterday. This was a build from yesterday. Okay. Cool. Okay, so that came out yesterday. So is that the new one? Does that mean if I give it a like what happens if I open up a Java 15 project? Does it do the right thing, or so? J15, 15, generate. Downloads, J15. Oops, did I do the, which version of Java am I using? Java 11, SDK list Java. I want to use this one. SDK default Java. Okay. Set Java 15 there. Set up the JDK. Java. Current. My SDK manager current one is 15. So I'm going to let it index that. Okay. Seems happy. Try the simple stuff first. Does it run? Okay, good. That didn't fail. That's nice. What about var string? That is cool. So wait, let's just run this. Please work. System out. String. Nice, huh? IntelliJ and Java 15 and Spring Boot all just work together perfectly. No like preview flags that I have to pass anymore. So now that is cool. That is, I've been waiting for that. I did a video on Java 14. Feels like forever ago, but it couldn't have been more than 8 months ago. Well, no, maybe. It was like, it's right before Java 14 came out. So Java 14, Josh, Spring tips. When did I do this video? March 11th, right as the pandemic descended upon us, right? So March 11th, and actually that's weird. March 11th is also the last day before. No, it's the last day where my family and I were under the illusion that we could avoid the pandemic in some way. So I did this video. I recorded it a few weeks before this, and it went out. Just this video it looks at like all the things that no thanks, it's fine. It looks at all the things that Java 14 could do, and you know you'd be stunned, right? There's just a lot of really amazing features. There's records. Is that enabled by default by chance? No. There's records. There's record types. There's smart. If what else is enabled by default in Java 15? Can I do smart casting? So var number equals, or var name equals Jane. If name instance of string then as n. No. See, you have to use preview features. You get sealed types, records, patterns, local enums, and interfaces. So when I looked at all those features, most of those are preview features in Java 14 as well. And so you can do something really like Kotlin. You can say, okay, if foo instance of string as foo string, then you can just say, okay, you know, system.println foo string dot to uppercase, and that's obviously to uppercase only exists on this string type, right? But if this check pattern matches, then you get a variable available only in this scope that's downcasted already to string. So you can just assume that's the type you're using. And in Kotlin, you get the same thing. So but it's even smarter in Kotlin. You can say, like, if foo is string, then foo to uppercase, right? Even if you don't know. So val foo object equals foo, right? In Kotlin. This is Kotlin code, of course. So that syntax feature has been there for a while in Kotlin. I'm just happy to see it in Java. Another thing I've wanted from other languages, like every other language ever, is multi-line strings. It's so cool that it's finally here, right? I can just use them out of the box. Oh, I guess you can't. You have to put them in the next line. There you go. So if you've used any programming language ever in the history of programming languages, then you've got multi-line strings. I dare say that even C++ probably has that. Let me see, C++ multi-line strings. I mean, you can use macros, right? This is okay. This isn't great, but it's still pretty okay, because that's what a lot of languages give you, is just you can say quote, 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 and just hit, there's no plus signs or anything, right? It's a macro, basically. Oh. I don't know. It looks like it's already been supported. Oh, wait. Is it actually a real 2016? I don't know. Yeah, okay, so maybe they haven't gotten it yet, but they will. They've got. Did you see C++ 2020 has coroutines? Coroutines. Uh, like Kotlin has coroutines. And JavaScript, uh, C Sharp, Rust, Go, Python. Not Go. Go has Go routines, which is kind of like coroutines, but not quite. But it's C Sharp, Rust, Python, JavaScript, and Kotlin, to name but a few, all have a language syntax for asynchronous programming. All of those languages, except for Kotlin, call it async await. In Kotlin, it's called suspend. But whatever. Either way, it's the same result, which is I can write seemingly imperative code line by line, and I get asynchronous results. I get asynchronous non-blocking execution, which is really what you want, right? So close tabs to the right. Close that. Okay, so Java 15 is working. Makes me happy. We've updated this. Did we already update this? Get status. Whatever. Goodbye. Now it's time to secure this thing, since we know it's working. Let's see what this thing's. What work is undone yet. Get diff. Okay, save it. Okay. Okay, let's do this. So we'll go here. Don't need this one. Don't need that one. That's bizarre. I've got two different IntelliJs open, so I'm bouncing back and forth between each. Okay, so let's introduce security. Let's go here. Introduce a new configuration called security configuration. And it'll just be a configuration class. And in that class, I'll introduce this stuff. Okay. And of course, we need the dependency on the left, so we go here. Spring Boot, start a web. We import that. I've already got all the other bits here. Oh, it's nice out. Hey Siri, weather.
It's currently partly cloudy and 61 degrees. Expect cloudy skies starting tonight. Temperatures are heading down from 63 degrees to 55 tonight.
Okay. Sounds nice. Okay, so that's... don't really need this. In-memory user details service. So this is the part where you would plug in centralized configuration. You can actually store the usernames and passwords in a database table. Just put them in, just implement this interface. You load user details by, load user by username, right? And so given a username, your job is to return user details, which is but an interface, so it doesn't matter where you get it, and Spring will do the rest, right? So here, I've got an in-memory one, where I've got a hard-coded username and password, but obviously that won't stand forever. In the real thing, it needs to be talking to an actual database. So okay, don't need this. So there's my config, my authentication, my HTTP endpoint, don't need all that. And assuming I did this correctly, then I should just be able to make a request to that search endpoint and get rejected out of the gate, I guess? Is that what I want? I guess that's what I want. Let's try it. So HTTP 401, that's cool. So let's just try yeah, so it's definitely broken. So now I need to try curl HTTP localhost 8080/token. What do I send? I send in a request to get a token, right? I authenticate. Do I just use HTTP basic? Yeah, I use HTTP basic with username and password. So minus u JLong password minus x post, and there's my token. Echo token. Okay, and now I can say curl minus h authorization error localhost 8080/podcast search query equal Yeah, that was weird. It's I didn't do anything. Did somebody just show an ad in my stream? That was bizarre. Does that happen a lot, I wonder? Yeah, well, no, even worse, I saw like a Tanzu thing, and then I could have sworn I saw like I don't even know what I saw. I was just there for a few seconds. But, okay, it seems like we're live again. At least that's what it looks like on my side. So, it's true. Anyway, that's working. That's working. I can't believe it. I'm so excited. So, curl H authorization bearer token and make a request and get a response, right? So, I dig it. We've now locked down my API. I do need to, yeah, tons of screen of death, exactly. We do need to store those usernames and passwords somewhere, which, oh, that's not going to be fun. Where do I store? I did this before. I got to think about where I did that before. I don't want to have to recreate all that stuff before. Where did I store those passwords before? What service did I use that used JWT and did encrypted values? Because I don't want this just being plain text in my database, right? Okay, I'll think about that. Another sprint. Yeah, plain text in GitHub, of course, absolutely. Uh, Another sprint is, while I think about what I'm trying to remember, I definitely didn't just use in-memory database with plain text in GitHub. I used something. The other thing I want to prove is that I can lock down just parts of it and leave the rest authenticated. So, for example, well, let's see. What endpoints do I have, actually? Let's shut down everything to make sure I'm using the latest version of everything. Goodbye. Okay, so CD code, Bootiful Podcast, API, idea. Okay, what version of IntelliJ am I using? 20.2, good, so that should be the one that's Java 15 compatible. Here's my security configuration. Okay, two things I'm going to need to do. So, write this down. Figure out how to authenticate with users' passwords in an encrypted database, and I need to figure out how to to mask only parts of the API. And the reason I need to do that is because some things are just read-only for static assets that are just out there, that I'm not trying to lock down, and that nobody would benefit from locking down since, I just send them back completely unchanged no matter who's asking. So, what's a good endpoint to lock down and not lock down? Pipeline controller. Podcast profile photo. Okay, so here's a good example. I want profile photo to work, but I want everything else to be locked down. And podcast's UID produced audio, I need that to be open. Okay, so let's see. This is UID. So what is it? What's a UID that worked? Okay, so there's a UID here, and so in theory, I should be able to go to podcasts, that UID, profile photo. What's happening? Oh, that requires connecting to AWS, and I haven't got the AWS credentials on my local machine. Fair enough. Okay, what about produced audio? Does that also require? Yeah, that it requires that as well. Status. There we go. So status. That should be finished processing, right? Okay, so there's the URL. Yeah, so basically there's a workflow here. When somebody uploads a archive, that gets sent into this incredibly crazy what? Spamming the chat. That's impressive given how small the chat is right now. Okay. So how do we delete spam? Does anybody know? Okay, anyway, so I'm thinking like, oh, there we go. Noise. Noise. We need mods. We got a mod. We got the best mod. Or mods. I don't know. Mods and mod. Okay. So I wanna lock down every endpoint that has to do with the, like, I don't mind reading the status, right? The status should be open. The profile photo should be open. So let's just try it out. Let's just try the search engine endpoint will be okay. The podcast endpoint, like anything that I can read, most of that is fine. I don't care if anybody can read it. But let's just pick 2 different endpoints and figure out how to lock everything down except for one. That way we'll know what to do, right? What is that emoji anyway? Anyway, okay, so authorize requests. Any request has to be authenticated, but I want to do a particular MVC matcher. So podcasts.uid.status permit all. So I'm going to say specifically this one endpoint is allowed, is going to be wide open, I think. And then everything else will be authenticated. Hopefully that's the way it works, or maybe it's the other way around, I never know. Okay, so can I just, so (401) still, oh no, that's what it is. I'm sending in a token. There you go. Okay, so that endpoint is wide open. Wait a minute, I wonder if that would have worked. And then what about anything else? So profile photo should be locked down, right? It shouldn't complain about S3, it should just say 401. Yeah, okay, so that's working. So I'm locked out of every other endpoint. Forget about the fact that it wouldn't have worked, right? But now if I have a token, the reason it failed the first time is because I had a token, it was just not a valid token, and this endpoint doesn't expect a token, but if you do send it, it's going to try and do something with it. And so we need to tell it to just not do that, right? Okay, so it looks like Status is working. Okay. So how do we? What endpoints do we want to lock down then? I guess. Maybe it'd be easier to say I want everything except for one endpoint to be open. Podcasts. Yeah. Seems reasonable. So everything, so I want that endpoint locked down. Otherwise, it's wide open. Does that make sense? That should make sense. Let's try it. But the other question is, do I have anything just called podcast.uid, right? Okay. Looks like that's the only endpoint that I have. That looks like that. So in theory, that one endpoint will be authenticated. So let's try it. We can just submit any old post. Curl. Well, first I need a token, right? So token, and then curl minus x post HTTP localhost 8080 / podcasts 123 minus h authorization bearer token. Oh, actually, no, we don't want to authenticate. We want to be locked out. So minus v 403. What does that say? What is HTTP? Okay. Okay, looks like that's good. What is the difference between that and 401 then? Yeah, unauthorized. Okay, so either way, Spring Security is kicking in. We're not allowed to get to that endpoint. What about everything else? Let's just see that. So if I go now to curl, it's fine. Doesn't require any kind of a token at all. Okay, that was actually way less painful than I thought, which means I'm back to solving the first issue, which is in-memory password versus persisted password. What did I do? Where did I do that? I did that with, this weekend. Okay, so github.com this week in. Okay. Here. Okay, that's the code. That's the client. Where's the API? Bookmark API. And then this is This is a reactive application. Same idea though. R2DBC Reactive User Details Service. Excuse me. And then did I specify the encoder somewhere? This is code that's in Kotlin for those of you who haven't seen it before. Yeah, there's the starter there. So that's clearly working. R2DBC. Okay, time to figure this out. Let's just do a... This is the first things first. We can just comment that out. Bean user details service, JDBC user details service, and return new JDBC. I expect I'll need a data source. Data source. Okay. And maybe a JDBC template. I mean, I don't want to waste too much time on this, but do I have a schema in here somewhere? Mappings. Okay. Looks like I've already got a repository. So I can create a user table. Okay, whatever. JPA. User, and then we got a field here, private string username, password. Okay. Now, if I restart, that'll probably create the schema for me, which means I don't really need to do it myself, which means I don't need this either, so I want to create a repository. So create a new class user repository, extending its interface, extending JPA repository. I think that's what the other one was after all. An integer or long. What did I have here? I had a podcast repository, extended query repository, podcast long. So not wanting to rock the boat, I'll do the same thing over here. User long. Okay, that was lazy, but it works. So let's just use that, and I'll say, yo, private final user repository, and the query that I need to run is given a user name, find me the user. So I can say collection of user find by username, string username, and Spring will provide that for me. So I can just say this dot find by username, username. So that'll give me an object, and my job is to turn that object, that user, into a user details. So private static class user details, JPA user details, implements user details, implement methods, good. Okay, collections dot singleton user, new granted authority, simple granted authority, user, good, that's one. I'm going to return private final string username password, this dot username, true, just for now. Okay, so now var results, and I can say, okay, visit each one of these results and map each JPA user into a new JPA user details, passing in jpa.get username, jpa.get password. Right? Isn't that all I needed? Oh yeah. And I also want the acquired rogues constructor. Is that another thing? It's right here. I also want the original. I want the original JPA object, don't I? So I want the original user. And I want the username and password. So I don't actually really need this either. I can just use the user. So this dot user get password. This dot user dot get username. Passing the user. Okay, and this becomes a lambda. And I want to collect the whole thing into a list. So I say collect collectors dot to list. Cool. Return by username. No, I want to say assert. So the other thing that we have to be careful of if there's no user that matches, we're not supposed to return null. We're supposed to throw not username not found exception. So assert. So if by username dot size does not equal 1, right? Basically, throw new username not found exception, couldn't find the user, couldn't find just a single, couldn't find one and only one, because I might get two inside. I don't know. It's possible I might get two responses. I should make that an index. We'll do that here right now. Private string password, and then how do I do this? Index unique is true. Alrighty, that looks about right. It's not applicable to a field. To what is it applicable then? Is it just the class? Do I just put it up there? Okay, let's try that. No. See table. So does it apply to a table annotation? Where's my user repository? Indexes. Aha. Okay. So then here column list equals username. That was horrific, but it works. Okay, so there we go. Now I shouldn't get more than one back, but you know, just in case somebody screws around. So couldn't find one and only one instance of the user username, right? So I want to make sure that I get just one. So if I can though, then by username dot get the first and only one, right? That should be right. Okay. Seems legit. I'm sure I'm missing 1,000 things here, but okay, so now we can factor that out. We can say this thing requires a user repository, not a data source. User repository. And what happens if I restart now? It should create a table. Oops. Oh, that might be the other issue, is that you can't have a table called user, because that's a keyword, isn't it? Yeah, okay, it's a use, like create user is actually a reserved word. I knew that. Okay, so table name will be users. No? Yeah, okay, no one asked you to resolve it, just have me type the string in. Okay, there we go. You can see it created a table. If it didn't exist, give it a primary key, ID, ID, password, varchar, alter table, podcast users, drop constraint if exists, blah, blah, blah. Alter table if exists, add constraint, unique username. Sweet nectar. Now, PSQL, view orders, Bootiful Podcast. insert into podcast users, username, password, values, glom, pw. Oh, Santa Maria. Okay, generated. No, actually, why doesn't that? Do I have to read the value from the sequence? Oh, slipped. Next valve. Yeah, Postgres. Sequence. Okay, select the next val. Okay. Dope. So select all from user, podcast user. Goody. Okay, so we've got now a user. Let's here's the coup de grace. Let's see if this works. So in theory, I should be able to get a token. Meanwhile, I don't need this. It's taking up RAM in my. I've got Docker. I shut down Slack, but I've still got Docker running. There's not enough room for all these other apps to stay awake. So let's go to our machine here. Good. Curl minus u glom pw minus x post http localhost 8080 8080 token, I guess is what I just called it, right? No password encoder. That's what I was going to try and figure out next, but it's forcing my hand, which is great because, you know, no such thing as too much security. So password encoder. What is the default one? There's a composite or something like that. Bcrypt delegating password encoder. So we want to create one of those. Turn new, and that one just isn't there like a factory or something like that I can use? Password encoder dot. No. Okay, ID for encode. So the idea with this is password encoder factories. There you go. The idea with this password encoder mechanism is that we want to have something that is responsible for taking the string that we send into the application and encoding it so that when we then compare it against the thing that's in the database that they have a chance of matching. The presumption being that only an idiot like myself would store plain text passwords in the database, right? And everyone else wouldn't do that. So we don't want to do that either, right? That was the sprint, right? That's so delegate factories, password encoder factories dot Cool. Let's just return that. Good. So that'll be the password encoder. And the password encoder in Spring Security, which is what we're using behind the scenes, is really pretty amazing. There's a whole hierarchy of password encoder implementations supporting Argon. That's new. I don't remember that one at all. Is that? Oh yeah, that is new. Spring Security 5.3. What's Argon? Hashing function. And by the way, these are all like it's important. I like how they're modern day security is cryptographically sort of inefficient, right? It's going to take time on the CPU. So how much CPU time do you want to waste? Not waste, but use, in the process of doing encryption. Okay. Anyway, I haven't looked at Argon 2. A key derivation function that was selected as the winner of the password hashing competition in July 2015. It was designed by Alex Buryukov, sorry if I'm butchering that, Daniel Dino, and Dmitry Kovratovich from the University of Luxembourg. The reference implementation of Argon Creative Commons, Patch 2 license, 3 related versions. Argon 2D maximizes resistance to GPU cracking attacks. It accesses the memory array in a password-dependent order, which reduces the possibility of time-memory trade-off attacks, but it introduces possible side channel attacks. Argon 2I is optimized to resist side channel attacks. It accesses the memory array in a password-independent order, and then there's a hybrid version. So I guess these 3 parameters are what we see reflected here in the description, right? See, it has a CPU cost, memory cost, and parallelization factor. So I guess you can just choose. I guess by specifying different parameters of that, you get different implementations. Is that true? Let's see what we win. Scroll down and see what happens. Whoa. So you build Argon 2 ID. Argon 2 ID. It's a hybrid version. So that's what we're getting. We're getting hybrid 2 ID. That's cool. Okay, well anyway, that's really cool, but that's not, it's clearly not the default, or otherwise these types would be represented on the class path. That is so cool, though. That's new. I haven't looked at Spring Security 5.3's password encoding stuff clearly. Okay, so anyway, you've got a bunch of different password encoders, and like all the perennial favorites are there. Stuff that shouldn't be there anymore, like LDAP and MD4, of course, have been deprecated. The no-op password encoder isn't going to go anywhere, but it's just there. It's deprecated, very much like the in-memory user detail service, which is to remind people that you shouldn't be using this in production. And then bcrypt, which is I think the default. And then Argon, and what else do you have? PBKDF and scrypt, etc. So the idea behind this delegating password encoder is that it actually has a map, and so it expects the password that it sees in the database to be prefixed in this fashion. So the password encoder sees the string in the database. What is an example? Here, the password should be like that, right? It'll say curly bracket. Let's see here. It'll say curly bracket, bcrypt curly bracket, and then the encoded string, and that's what's actually stored in the data store. And that's why I didn't see any mention of it before. So okay, so what that means is I need to make sure that I encrypt a password. How can I do that? I think I can use the Spring CLI. Hold on, my legs are not great. Okay, so what I want to do is Spring CLI bcrypt. Okay, Spring Boot Cloud. 7 years ago. Spring encode password. Okay, let's try that. So we do Spring encode password PW. Whoa, there's my bcrypt. Isn't that cool? So what do I get if I PB copy? Do I get the whole thing? Yeah, I just get. That's dope. Okay, good. So okay, so we want to store this in a variable. PW equals echo PW PSQL echo insert into podcast users ID username password values select next val hibernate sequence and then the name is JLong and the password, I wonder if this will work. Password is that PSQL U orders Bootiful Podcast. So close. Do I need to? Oh, it's a select thing again, of course. Of course it failed. Delete from podcast users. Thank you. Oh, so select all from podcast users. Okay, so if I've done my homework, then the delegating password encoder is going to see that we've got a. It'll pick a default, and the default in this case is bcrypt. So when somebody sends in a plain text piece of string from the client, that is to say curl, Spring Security's filter is going to intercept that. It's going to go, oh, you want this to be a password that's going to match against the one and only configured user detail service, which in turn talks to your database. That database is no doubt going to be expecting bcrypt encrypted passwords. So it's going to take that username and password that I sent in from the client, encode it, and then give it to my user detail service to match. So the user detail service is going to return the encrypted. When I say user.getPassword, it should return this whole string from the database. And if we've done our homework, then the in-memory version of the password that comes from the client that's already been password encoded should match up with what we have in the database, and they should be allowed to go through. So let's see if I'm right or if I'm just hoping. I think I'm hoping. You never know. So I've configured an explicit password encoder here, which is just going to delegate. And by the way, the reason you do this is because tomorrow the password du jour, the password encoding scheme du jour might be something else, right? Maybe it's Argon or something, right? Maybe they decide it's all quantum bcrypt or something. I don't know. Who knows? So you want your users to be able to still authenticate. So when Spring Security sees a password that says it's a bcrypt, if the incoming request, doesn't if it doesn't match, it'll look for the username, it'll find the password and say, oh, the password that we should use is actually bcrypt, and we'll use that bcrypt encoder to try and match, instead of trying to match it against Argon, or quantum bcrypt, or whatever the new current default is, right? That's why you want that there, so you know how to match. Okay, so let's try it. Oh, I'm nervous. This might work. If it works, then I think I'm, it's been a good day. Then we can get back to the real fun of client-side JavaScript. Ugh, can't believe I just said that. Okay, we've got our user curl -u JLong pwx post http localhost 8080/token. Hey, we got a token. Okay, so token equals that business echo token. So far so good. Now what? I guess we just try and see if it works. So I'm going to try and submit. I'm going to make a request of the one endpoint that we've locked down. It's locked down, so it's not going to upload anything because it doesn't have the AWS S3 keys, right? So what we should see is that we get a 500 error because it's going to throw an exception on the server side. It's not going to reject the request because it's unauthenticated, right? It should be a 200. I mean, if the code didn't blow up on the server side, we'd get a 200, right? Or 201 or something, a 200 series. So what we're expecting is a 500 instead of a 400. It should be a valid token, but an invalid request. Or a broken request, right? Okay, so let's try this now. So curl HTTP first -h authorization bearer token localhost 8080 and we want -x post podcasts 1 2 3 4 5 whatever. Yeah, got a 500. So it actually got to the code. That's what we want, right? So current request is not a multi-part request. Perfect. That means that it tried to invoke the endpoint. There's no file upload there, so obviously that's going to fail. But you can see it authenticated and it got to the endpoint and it failed. So what if I sent let's try it again, right? Let's send a bad token. See, that was a different error. I got a 401. That's my. If I clean up the error here. Goodbye. Nothing. There's no exception. It never reached my endpoint. It never reached the authenticated endpoint. So if I send a bad token, it doesn't work. If I send oh, it even says invalid token. How cool is that? Nice. Okay, good. So we've got now our security scheme. I like that. I like that a lot. That's good. That's fun. I'm glad we did this. Save that. I have this script called save, and all it does is it runs this plugin. Oh, there's new. I've got new IntelliJ. Gotta enable the plugins, bash support. Goodbye. Stop bothering me. Okay, good. So, doesn't plugins shell seems legit. Okay. Okay. So I've got a script here, and all the script does is it runs Maven Spring Java format apply, and then it commits everything and pushes it. And the reason I do this is because it's continuous delivery. So every time I do this, it'll go to my development site, right? So you can see CF API or CF search API development. That's up and running, right? Search API development and API development. So that's the one that we're right now. That's coming back online. And curl, well, podcasts search query equals edu. Four. Okay, so that app is restarting right now. That's the issue, right? I just did a git push, and it's restarting the service, so that'll be back online. But the point is, I like to get working bits out into my development environment, at least, before I push it into the actual production environment. Okay, so now we've got that. I think I want to make it work with my JavaScript application. So what next? What's the score here? What do I want to do here? I've done this before. I feel like I must have done it somewhere. I don't want to do this again. JavaScript is a thing best to be avoided unless you have a stiff drink or something. Okay, how did I do this before? This is the desktop application. The service is working again, so it's back online. Goodbye. Goodbye. Bookmarking API. This weekend. Log in. Something like this. Okay. Oh, I already got one. So what does that do exactly? What does that buy me? Login service, got an auth URL, that would be localhost 8084/token, right? And then if I want to get a response, what am I doing exactly? I want to log in. So you can see I bootstrapped some of this Vue app from an existing Vue app that I've got, and I'm just slowly building it back to useful form. But of course, it's been a minute since I wrote this code, and don't care about it. Okay, here's my login. That looks like the interesting bit. Request options, post, headers, accept, basic, blah, blah, blah. Using the fetch API, call that endpoint, then get the response. If the status is 200, then get the text, and then with the text, that's the token. If that token's real, then store it in local storage as user under a JSON string thing, and then return a user. Log out. And if I want to remove the user to clear the browser session, and just remove the item from the local storage. That seems reasonable. I mean, I don't understand what else could what could go wrong with that. Okay, looks reasonable. I'm gonna take a quick bio break and pour myself one of those aforementioned beverages. I'll be right back in a minute. Give me 3 minutes. Okay, where are we? Oh, hey, none of that. What in the... We're back, friends. We good? Looks like we're good. Okay. Yeah, okay, we're good. We're live, we're good, it's working, things are fine. So, I think all I want to do to get this, and again, we're good? I just saw Twitch flash in and out again, that was weird. So all I'm going to do now is take my code and turn it into a user interface. And I've done this before. I'm not saying I'm proud of it, I'm just saying it worked before, so I can conceivably just borrow from that and maybe get myself a working thing first. And, that's a key part of engineering, I think, is that make it wiggle experience, right? Like right now, have you noticed I'm just moving very quickly, doing the least I can do to get something working, and of course I'll pay for that in the future if I don't go back and then polish it off, and make it work. But all I'm trying to do is make it wiggle. Once it's working, once I have a basic end-to-end type username and password, get a token, issue a request for a search, and get the results back, all from my JavaScript client talking to my service, then that's awesome, right? That's half the battle. I can deploy that to production anytime I want, right? It may not be pretty, but it's functional, right? And then I can go back and, after all, one of the core conceits of what I'm trying to do here is to create a nice experience, to rework the user interface, to bring in that fancy Adobe XD design and all that stuff. But first things first, functionality, okay, so components, bookmark, source, login. How do you log in? Where's my logger? Editor app. Editor view. Oh, and as if there wasn't already enough pressure to get this done quick, I just noticed that the OBS laptop, which has been having it's having a hard day. This is not meant to, MacBook Pros weren't meant to do things with CPUs. They're just not that fast. So I have a creakingly old 2018 MacBook Pro with 32 gigs of RAM, and I just noticed that despite being plugged into power, to my chagrin, let's see if I can switch the power. Maybe it's just the adapter through which it's flowing, but despite having been plugged into power this entire time, that MacBook Pro is down to 22%. So let's see if it actually takes. Maybe it'll, nope, down to 21% despite having unplugged it from the adapter. So I have all the more reason to giddy up. Gotta get going. Gotta do it. Okay. So 21. Okay. Even less time to waste. So friends, editor. Where am I logging in? Where is this code being handled in this thing? This is the editor. That's not what I want. What I want is the source application. app, I suspect. Container fluid account authenticated. Where's my account attribute? Do I have an account? Bring in the login service in my app code. Let's try that. And I have a login component apparently. Where is that? I wonder. Dope. Look at that. Raw. And okay, so username, password. So this is just a component in Vue, right? In Vue, you can do it the old-fashioned way, which is just straight JavaScript, or you can have a little bit of a transpilation compilation phase where you actually have these nifty .vue files where you have the template, the component logic, the actual JavaScript logic, and the styling, the CSS, if you want it all in one unit, one code unit, which is nice because it makes it easier to figure out. Given this, I get that. So let's see what that login component does for us. It looks like there's a button down here. So it looks like it's going to attempt. Okay, so when I use this component, it's going to have a username and password for me, and it's going to have a button. And when somebody clicks the button, it's going to trigger this function. This function is going to do some basic validation, and then it'll emit an event, a Vue.js event, and then my business logic can listen for that event and use that to actually do the authentication. So that's when we hand off to, or rather, try to figure out the business of JWT, right? That's the actual logic there. So let's first prove that this works. Let's go to the app. What's in the app right now? The app right now has just the router views, which is fine. And what's the first route view that we get? It is the create page or the search page, right? So let's make it the login page. So login page.view, and we want to just take one of these existing pages. Go to my login page that I just created, all fancy. Login page, and here for the sidebar, you're to want to provide a valid username and password. Okay, and in the panel, I want to have the login component. So I'll say login, and I can say authenticate. What is the event? It's called authentication attempt. I think it works like that, right? I just put that in there. Attempt login. So I need a function, methods, console, attempting login, auth attempt with username, auth attempt. Well, actually, let's just try logging it out first before I get too far down that way. Let's just see if this works. Okay. So now, in theory, I go to here. Failed to compile. What's the issue? Oh, login service is unused. That's fair. But I have to hold it against me. Gee. And then where's my routes? I have those routes somewhere. So app. Is it main? Yeah, it's main. Okay, so the root page is no longer the search page. It'll be the login page. Okay. So now what happens? Looks like it's happy. Go to here. Hey, cool. Okay, so the login component gets me pretty far down the way already. So now I actually have to just use, I just have to use the JWT stuff. Now the question is, why is that looking so horrible? I should worry about that later, right? I should totally just focus on the business logic at hand, because the rest of my UI, the rest of my design doesn't have blue buttons, right? If you look at the, and here I close Adobe XD. Why, Josh, why? Okay, open that up. So here, every button is just black text against a white background. Also, the formatting, you can see the markup for fields and for sections is different. So, and I've even successfully, designed all that, right? So if you go here, sidebar, blah, 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 create a new episode, details, form group, label, all this stuff. So where's my, if I look at this page in my browser, reveal in Finder, right? So I've got, clearly I've already figured this out over here. You can see I've got actual links and all that stuff. And so I want to figure out what I have to do to make it so that username and password look like title and description instead, right? They shouldn't be lowercase like that. So what is it? What exactly is it that's wrong with that? Okay. There. So what style? Form group. This is that. What about this over here? Login. Login.view. So over here, form group label class panel prompt. Does that look right? Yeah, now we're cooking. Okay, so and then we want class panel prompt for this. Nice. And then in the actual page itself, log in. Okay, that's more like it. Now we're cooking. And then I expect over here we need to actually have a valid log out and log in link, right? So if you're not logged in, it should be log in. If you're logged in, it should be log out, right? Okay, good. So now, what about the button? Why is that so weird? What did I do over here that's so different? A links. Okay, so for my login component, I have a button instead of a link. So how do I make that? Will this just work? Same way? That's the only business logic. And then that was all in a div called buttons. Yeah, okay. Now we're back to normal. So now, how do we... Let's make sure that this works. Yep, it works still. So now we have to actually turn that into a call to the actual service, which I think we can do. Login service. What did I do in the old code? I guess that's the real question. Okay. Bye. Bye. Okay, and then here in my app, do I log in? What happens there? It's clear this is where I do the actual bit. Okay, so I have a const login service. Root URL equals whatever that is. Okay, so that's an app.view at the top. Okay, and I need to import login service. Okay. So this looks familiar. So that goes in where? That goes in the created endpoint. And then bookmark service, I don't care about that yet. I just want to know that I have console.log. The user is user. Okay, seems legit. Let's try that out. Still an issue. Login service is being unused. Oh, authentication success. Okay, so there's actually another function for authentication attempt. Is that true? After authentication. So that's this bit right here. That's the thing that actually gets invoked when somebody clicks on that login button. So I'm going to create that as a method here in the app. Authentication username and password. Then emit this. So that's the actual business. Okay, so this in my login page. Maybe I can put that here for now. Okay. That's not what I want, is it? I want, on the login page, I want to emit the event yet again for things above me to find it. In this case, the login page is yet another component inside of app. So in this case, I want to emit the event one more time, which I can do by using this.emit. Is that redundant? Seems like it is. I wonder if it would just bubble up if I didn't do that. Okay, so auth attempt console.log, going to propagate auth attempt for auth. Okay. That'll publish the event one more time, one level higher. And then once that happens, it should get up to my app. In my app, I want that to listen. So I'll say on authentication attempt. Is that what it is? Login attempt. Yeah. So on the login page, it'll send login attempt. Right? Oh. Okay. I get it now. So in the login page, it emits an authentication attempt event. I want to listen to that here. I want to say, okay, this dot on, and then here, I want to respond to it. And here's where I'll be given the actual credentials. Attempt in app.view, attempt, and so let's just confirm that these are all propagating and handing off as I think they should. And then what I'm going to do here, to do actual auth with login service.js, right? That's a to do. That's what I got to do next. Once that goes through, then that will presumably emit a authentication success event. That's this bit right here, right? Actually, well, first let's just test everything's wired up correctly. So, good, JLong, going to propagate attempt for auth, JLong using, okay, where did that happen? So, the button, hip bone connects to the thigh bone, connects to this, attempting authentication. Is that not this? Where does it get that? Where's that function then? Okay. Login attempt. It's interesting. So the app has a login service. I don't even know. I've lost where I had going to propagate. I don't even know where this message. Oh, login page. Oh, okay. So I got to this point. That's nice. And then so that actually got to the page. That's the component that contains the login component. And that emits I gotta propagate. I don't want to do a success. I gotta do an, okay, so. And then I want to get to app. And app is where I listen for this, right? So I go here and I say, okay, paste. So emit that attempt one more time. I wonder why I can't see that in this topmost component. Is it because of the routing? Like, does the view router not have the concept of a hierarchy necessarily? Like, remember, my login page is a view, it's a route. I'm wondering if that gets like involved. Right now it's showing me the login form, which is inside of the login page, which is inside of app, but it, you can see I can switch over there and it's no longer inside of that. So okay. Why is that? That's interesting, huh? I mean, honestly, it doesn't really need to be. Hmm. Okay. Route Vue.js routes router views events from child component. Like, what if I got, so here's an experiment. What if I got rid of these router views, just for now, and I put in the login page directly? What happens there? Okay, same, right? Okay, I'm happy with that actually. It's not working, but that's consistent then. So if I get rid of this, that's gone. Good. Okay, so it's broken, but on the other hand, I'm happy if it's broken because it's consistent now. Login page type. Thank you. So go to the login page. Now it doesn't seem like it's showing me anything actually. So if I go to the login component, and I hit submit, what's that about? So it's click login attempt. Oh, I want info, not debug. Okay. Starting attempting authentication, good. And then we got the authentication attempt event, which was presumably bubbled up to the login page. And where is that? It didn't. How do you do events if that's not the right way? Do you not do it this way? Node.js, events, emit. Okay. Add click, that looks right. That was weird. Well, this is interesting, friends. It says this.emit, and it's being done inside of a method inside of the method stanza. So it looks like that's the basics of it, right? So login, this dot $emit update. Here's the arguments attempting authentication. That's in the methods, so it's a login attempt. We know this is being executed. We can see clear as day this output statement here. Okay, so why isn't this then bubbling upwards? Right, that's the issue. So authentication attempt, you would think, would propagate upwards. So log in, and then login page. What if I just listen for the event globally? Like when it's mounted, I say this dot on event console.log event. Okay. It's bizarre, but who knows? Maybe it'll work. Okay. Not even a little bit. Huh. Wait, what? Event. What does it say? Login. Login page. Okay. What's the issue though? Oh, it worked here. So login page, I can actually trap it two different ways. Okay. So I don't actually need this here, do I? I can just listen to it as a global event, right? Looks like. Why? Yeah. So in both cases. Wait, how is that the case though? Attempt login is no longer bound to that event. Event. Goody. So That's this bit right here, E. And then this dot my callback E. Does that work? Why? And for that matter, can I just call my callback? Whatever. Just see if that works. Yeah, it did work. Okay, so that's how you would do it. So what about this? I'm calling authentication attempt. What? Oh, maybe it's that. Const that equals this. That. Y. Or what if I just did that? Is that okay? What the? Okay. But if I do so here, console.log event. I mean, this is as chill as it gets, right? Y. Wait, what? My kingdom for JavaScript expert. This is so crazy. Oh, mounted. Maybe that's well, what, I mean, actually, why wouldn't that be okay? Actually, what if I just did it later? What if I just said, okay, so login page uses login. Login has this event called authentication attempt. Let's just go back to brass tacks here. Equals my callback. Should be fine. Right? Submit. Going to propagate it. Good. So login is able to propagate to login page successfully if I do it directly. Now, what about if I am login page from up here, from the app? I don't know how to do that within. So let's try going back to just restoring the login page directly. Something's fishy. Very fishy indeed. How come authentication attempt at that level isn't getting caught? What about down in the right at the very beginning? What about if I have a callback? So just after authentication, okay, what about this? Where's my attempt? Here. equals you So if I bind specifically, I can get the if I bind to the component. But how do I do that with a router view? See, these are the things that I will probably spend a lot more time trying to debug than I wanted to. But it is now 15:10, friends, and I think this is going to involve a lot of head scratching and googling. So I think we should call it. It's been fun, but I'll pick up again later. The code is endless and time is not. So obviously, I appreciate your time, everybody. I enjoy this live streaming thing. It's a shame there's not much of a not much of a crowd today. We'll try again next time, I suppose. Maybe it's just a JavaScript. That would scare me off too. I wouldn't want to watch that either. You know. All right. Thanks everybody. Appreciate it. Hope you're having a great day. Stay safe. Stay healthy. And as always, we'll see you next time.